Hey, welcome everybody to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future-thinking business leaders about how to accelerate and grow their business. I'm here with Jon. Jon, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, hi, Ben. I'm Jon Rennie. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Peak Demand, and we are a manufacturing company in North Carolina, and we make products for electric utilities, and we've been in business for 8 years. Prior to that, I did 22 years working for 3 global companies, running factories around the U.S., making these similar products. And then before that, I was a naval officer on nuclear submarines in the U.S. Navy before entering my corporate career and then eventually becoming an entrepreneur.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. A lot of kind of the phases of your life have been very distinct, but I'm sure there's a common thread. What was your first job?
Yeah, the first job out of college as a naval officer on a nuclear submarine was very much a technology job in terms of we all had to be trained as nuclear engineers because we were running a nuclear power plant at sea, which is a highly technical type of operation, if you can imagine. And me being an officer and an engineer, I had to be certified as a nuclear engineer to be able to be an officer on that ship, which all the officers had to be. And then, of course, we had 24 nuclear weapons as well. So you had all this sort of nuclear technology in a 150 with 155 18-year-olds in under the ocean. So it's a challenging technical kind of environment. So and all my career, I've been leading teams doing technical things or difficult things, and probably not as difficult as being under the ocean with a nuclear reactor, though.
Right. Did you have any job before that? Like my first job was like the paper boy. Did you have anything that predates that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I worked, all through high school and college. I did everything from residential construction to fast food to I ran a shotgun on a beer delivery truck, delivering beer to restaurants and supermarkets and bars. That was a lot of fun. But I've done a lot of different jobs. I've worked in supermarkets. I've worked in libraries. I've done a lot of things prior to, kind of launching a career in more technical side of things.
Yeah, I find most technologists do have they kind of experience life without a specialized skill. And then they're like, I think I'm going to go figure out something specialized so that I don't have to do that anymore. Sounds like you had a few of those. What toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career-wise today?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I know my father was a high voltage electrician working for electric utilities. So I was always in the world of electric utilities. Like I knew what he was doing. Like when we'd have a major ice storm or winter storm, he'd be, gone for 3 days at a time, restoring power. So I kind of knew what the grid was and, what the grid, how important it was and the people that were behind the grid. I sort of knew that. So I think that's probably a little bit of how I sort of ended up here, but it was sort of by chance. I got out of the military. I had 2 job offers. One was to Merck Pharmaceutical as a pharmaceutical sales rep or a design engineer for a company called ABB that made products for electric utilities. Well, I didn't know anything about selling drugs, but I did know something about engineering. So I chose the engineering field. And so I ended up in the same space my father worked in, but not really, it was just by luck, I think. I don't know how I ended up
coincidentally,
here. Yeah, it's just coincidentally. Yeah, for sure.
What was your favorite and least favorite course in college?
I took a lot of, I was mechanical engineer, so I took a lot of technical courses. I actually enjoyed all of the math. So everything from differential equations, all through all that. I enjoyed the math side of it. I would probably say chemistry was always my hard spot. I just never quite could. Chemical equations are not like mathematical equations. They just don't make sense to my brain. I'm a very logical thinker. So math is always the same every time, no matter how you look at it. Chemistry is like you have to memorize things, and I just was never good at it. So chemistry never made sense to me.
I had a mechanical engineering aspiration in college and then ended up kind of going computer science really because I could skip that organic chemistry, the chemical equations, the
Yeah.
triple integrals, like, not going to be an EE if you can't do triple integral, and then the organic chemistry. And then my son, who's in college, he also is feeling that pain, but he's doing so much better than I ever did.
It's interesting because I think they made chemistry so complicated to me, at least when I was in engineering school, that I struggled to understand it. But when I went in the Navy, we had to take reactor plant chemistry. Like, here's what you need to know to be a nuclear engineer. And it made sense then because I could really apply it. Here's the things to watch out for. Here's why we measure chemistry in the way we do. And here's what can happen if this gets too acidic or base. Like, it made sense to me because it was like in an application. So I think for me, at least, I'm that kind of person. If I can feel it, touch it, sense it, then it makes sense to me. If it's abstract, I'm always struggle a bit with, like, how does this matter? Why does this matter?
Yeah, that's cool. That's super self-aware. I think if people are that self-aware, then they can find tips and tricks to handle something if they have to. Like, if you have to handle something, you're kind of aware that, I need to invoke the higher brain function. This isn't going to come easy. That's super good. What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
Yeah, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena, is my favorite quote of all times, because I think I've always been the man in the arena. I've always been the guy, an operations guy. So I'm fighting the daily fight. I absolutely am addicted to manufacturing operations, mostly because you can never make everything work seamlessly. There's always a problem, and you're always working to struggle to overcome challenges, whatever they might be. It might be people, it might be parts, it might be systems. There's always something that you're trying to fix. I always say it's like a Rubik's Cube with a side missing. You're always trying to solve it, and you never can quite get everything running smoothly at any one point in time. So it's a very addictive. Those of us who are in manufacture or in operations, we love the challenge of it. And so, yeah, the man in the arena, there are critics all around you pointing and saying how weak you are or where you fall or where you stumble. But ops guys, we get things done. And so I think I've really, anything that Teddy Roosevelt has done, but especially the man in the arena quote, means a lot to me.
Cool. And then what was the greatest invention or discovery in the past 300 years?
Yeah, it's got to be the internet. Being 56 years old, I remember a time when there wasn't the internet, right? And so what life was like before and what life is like now, it has really changed us. The ability to connect over long distances, the ability to find information, the ability to be able to, basically know what's happening around the world at any point in time. It's really wild. And I think in a lot of ways, the human mind can't handle it, right? I think it's more information than we can handle. And we're still trying to figure out, like, how to live this life with internet. And I think I think we're essentially cavemen trying to figure all this stuff out. And it's moving a lot faster than we can handle it. And we can see that from the social fabric sort of being torn apart by various, people taking sides of various issues that never would have even known about people in the past, right? So now we're fighting with tribes that we never even heard of in the past,
Yeah, I kind of think that we're much in the same way when the Industrial Revolution started. And, of course, many of our processes were highly pollutant. They were kind of dirty and sloppy, if you will. We just didn't have high standards. We were so excited to get it working that, and then also what happened to the generation before, manual labor became less favorable or less valuable, in replace of people who knew how to work on the machines. Right. And I think in the information age, we're seeing exactly what you said. We're seeing this similar thing where we're still quite immature with this responsibility of global information. COVID, the response to COVID wouldn't have been possible even 10 years prior. I have obviously some good friends overseas, and even in places where you wouldn't expect folks to have internet access, they were getting text messages about masking and staying in place and being 6 feet apart, and they were getting all the public service instantly upon discovery. So then there can be overreactions and underreactions, but there can be overreactions to news because it can spread so quickly. And I completely agree with you. I think we're still quite immature about how we handle information, and the penalty for false information is still yet to be determined. You can I'm not advocating for the information police, but as some way we have to mature our relationship with this information age. I completely agree with you. Cool. So I'll go on to some of these heavier questions. What tech trends significantly impacted you or your industry, and how did your company respond?
It's a great question. When I was thinking about coming on this podcast, one of the things that is interesting about the market I serve electric utilities, and by their very nature, they're very conservative. And so they are very slow to adopt new technology. And I'll give you an example. So smart grid was like the thing that was going to happen to the grid. And so I was with another company before I started my company, and we were on that cutting edge of the smart grid technology. We were developing products that would be the future of the grid. And one of the things I noticed is that after a while, I noticed that we'd have many utilities interested in it. They would do these pilot projects. And so we ended up having like pilot projects around the country, but nobody was spending any real money on it. And so because of the conservative nature of the industry, it was going to be another 10 years before people were spending the kind of money that we expected they'd be spending on this kind of technology. So one of the challenges at least in the industry I serve, is trying not to get too far ahead of your own skis, right? Because if you get on that bleeding edge, if you're too far ahead of what the customers truly are willing to embrace, then you end up having no revenue stream. So it's a really interesting balance that I play in this particular industry. So we want to be moving ahead and advancing, but it has to be incremental, and it has to sort of look like what they're used to. And so I'll give you an example. So we took one of our products is a current transformer for metering applications. So we use it to measure the power going into a commercial installation, for example. And so we found a kind of steel called nanocrystalline steel that we can employ in this current transformer device that could get a much more accurate signal, and it could handle wider variations of current loads. And so it completely changed the industry. And now everybody uses that technology. But it was something we developed about 15 years ago. And when we first launched it to the market, it was complete crickets. But the only thing that saved it is it looked exactly like what they were used to getting. And it was sort of the same form factor, but it was much better in the inside. And so over time, eventually we have most of the market buying that sort of technology. But it took a real leap of faith to get those first few customers, because they were like, well, what is this new material? Is it going to last for 40 years? There are a lot of concerns about this shift in this technology. So I would say that So these kind of technologies, at least in my space, it's got to be incremental, and it's got to be proven before that money is going to be spent. So we got to be really careful not to get too far out in front of it, because you can end up being on that, what I call the bleeding edge of technology, which we're trying to kind of, at least as a smaller company, I can't be that far out. I got to be into where revenue is being generated.
Yeah. You can't be so far ahead of the demand curve that you have no buyers.
Right. And I saw that.
Yeah. Did you learn anything about like education-based marketing in that early phase, like where you had to kind of teach people about this new material and this new methodology?
Well, I was like an evangelist. I was traveling around the country. I did this presentation about this nanocrystalline steel. I mean, thousands of times in front of hundreds of customers. So, and now I still go to trade shows and I give the speech, and there's still customers that are not using that technology yet still. And I literally look at them and I go, I've been spending 15 years saying the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And you haven't bought it yet. Why not? So yeah. But what's interesting about that is when you get into that space where you do teach and train and show new technology, you become that expert that they come to for new advancements. So my company is kind of known for this technology now, and we have a lot of people coming to us because like we're considered the experts in using this material in this product. So I think when you do a lot of training like that and you are the expert, people come to you for other solutions as well.
So what are some of those additional innovations in current time that you're betting on to drive business growth?
Yeah, so that's so for us at least, what we're finding is if we take that same form factor, so for this metering current transformer as I'm mentioning, and we keep adding more features and benefits to it, then they find that these are things that our customers can with spec in their products or in their requests when they're requesting products. When we develop a range, for example, or a certain classification level that other people can't do, then we're getting to a position where we become the only supplier that can do a certain function. So for us, it's been about incrementally adding more and more, if you will, features and benefits to the kind of that portfolio of products. And also keeping our eyes and ears open to things that are going to change in the industry. So what is going to replace this product in the future? And for right now, there's some ideas, there are some things that are going to potentially work, like Rogowski coils and voltage dividers, and there's some new technology that are out there, but it's not quite ready for prime time yet. So, it's one of these things where we're sort of keeping an eye on it and waiting for it. So here's the deal with my company. As a small company, we say we want to be fast followers. So we don't want to be the one that launches the new product first. We want to launch it second, and we want it to be better than the first. And that's pretty much what we're kind of targeting our efforts, is being second to market and being better than that first player. So we want to be the VHS tape to that beta tape that's out there. We want to be that, because I don't have the size or deep cash wells to be that, to take the risks of being first. So I like to be second.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. What are some more of those? You mentioned some, but what are the most significant gaps between your ambitions and realities today?
I would say this is that one of the biggest challenges is being able to deal with the type of industry that we're dealing with, as I mentioned, the electric utility space. 3,000 individual utilities, right, around the country providing power to the grid. It's probably one of the most dangerous situations we're in America right now, because the grid is falling apart. Okay, it is old. It has been overused. It's not been maintained. It's not been invested in, and now we're plugging everything into it. Right. So we've got with all this new technology coming, all these server farms and all the electrical vehicles and everything, more and more we keep plugging into the grid, and then we say, well, solar and wind, that's going to fix it. But it's not. It's the infrastructure that's really old. It's an amazing piece of technology, but it's also archaic and it's old, and it's not being maintained that well. So I would say one of the biggest things is, what are we doing about the grid? The grid needs to be modernized in a big way, and I think it's hard to do it when you have 3,000 customers all doing 3,000 different things, and each one of them is filled with engineers with their own ideas. And so as a supplier in the industry, it's really hard to get people moving in a singular direction.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And that you just kind of like big commercial for buying my own generator at the house. Yeah. I would buy stock in Generac, and I would get you a generator for your house, because I think that, we're one of, you look at Texas, they had the ice storms and all the power that was lost there. It just shows how, A, how interconnected the grid is, and B, how vulnerable it is to big events, big weather events. Look at what happened to Superstorm Sandy. Look what happened to Puerto Rico. So we are susceptible to large weather events. And we're so interconnected that you can have this cascading effect. And we Americans, I'm just going to say Americans, we're not really good when the power goes out. We lose our minds very quickly. So, and we don't know what to do without internet and without power. So I do think that we need to be spending a lot more money modernizing the grid. Yeah, no, that's great feedback. Um, and true. I mean, we're also plugging in. I mean, the per person to AC/DC power plug-in is probably orders of magnitude different. I mean, I just think of how many things I have plugged in right now to run.
Yeah. Why don't we have a DC grid in every house? We should have a DC grid. We should have a 12-volt grid in our house as well as our 110-volt grid for our. I mean, we probably have more running on low volt on DC than we do on AC now with all the different, because how many of your devices actually have a converter on it, a DC converter, AC to DC converter,
right?
Like a TV, for example. I mean, we're doing this. We have a large DC load on the circuit today, and we should have a DC bus in every house that you plug into. Just like you would a boat or a car, you have a 12-volt DC system,
Right. Yeah, very cool. So my next question is just about how you approach risk when you're implementing a new technology, and you've kind of alluded to that. But I'm also kind of thinking about how you consider your roadmap and how do you take risk into account. I mean, you've already expressed some cautiousness in terms of making sure that you are innovating within existing markets, not trying to create, new markets that don't exist yet. But share a little bit more about how you approach risk and how you approach your technology roadmap.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I remember, there was a quote from, I think it was the founder of LinkedIn, who said, if you're not embarrassed by the first iteration of your product, then you're moving too slowly. So as an entrepreneur, that's always in the back of my mind. So I'm always want to go faster maybe than others. So that idea of being a really fast follower is really important to me. But I think the best way to manage risk is to, it's like, you can make the best dog food in the world, but if the dogs don't eat it, it's not going to be great dog food. So it is try to get your product in front of people as quick as you can. I think so. One of the things we try to do is we get our products to trade shows in those early stages when we're probably a little embarrassed about it, and we get really good feedback. Like, this would be okay, but it needs to have this, or why did you guys do it this way? It really needs to have X, Y, and Z. And so we learn a lot by showing early versions of the product to customers and getting some feedback. The only challenge with that sometimes is you may get a data point from a trade show, right? That from a big customer that says, oh, you really need to do that for it to work. Or we had an example where we went to one of our first designs on a particular product we launched. We got great feedback from a trade show, and everyone said this is going to be the perfect solution to what we've been looking for. And so we launched into the market with that design configuration. And sure enough, like the first few customers that bought it in a different region said, it's not going to work for our system. We have to have the old version of it, the old design version of it. And so be careful, like you don't take that data from one region and try to apply it universally. You do need to get some feedback from other places. But I think get feedback first. But also so for us in the technology roadmap, it's all about what do we want to do with our existing portfolio, and where do we want to grow the portfolio in areas that we think are going to be the high growth areas in our industry. So what do we need to have for what's happening now on the grid? And that's really what we're thinking about all the time. What products do we have to have next to be able to support what we're doing already, but also kind of attack where the future is? So where we look at the future is we look at cities that are bustling, cities that are booming. So what is the city of Austin doing right now? What is the city of Orlando doing? What is the city of Nashville doing? Those are the kind of things where we're looking at growing cities and what those utilities, those specific utilities are doing in their region, because we get a sense of where things are headed.
That's cool. What lessons have you learned from initiatives that failed to produce their expected value?
Yeah, I've got a corner of shame in my factory here of products that didn't work. And again, if you go with the philosophy of, you might be embarrassed of your first iteration. If you're trying to go fast, you're going to make some mistakes along the way. And so I went fast on a couple of different products that didn't really, pan out in the market. They had the right technical answer, but the economics didn't work, right? And so we weren't able to make money doing it. So the customers liked it, customers bought it, but the logistics, these products were heavy and the price point was low. And so getting it to the customer cost a lot of money to ship it across the country. And so we were losing our shirts on the logistics side of it. So we solved, we solved the technical problem, and we got screwed with the logistics problem that we didn't think of. We were thinking purely from an engineering perspective and not from a overall economics perspective. So, my only caution is if you're doing something and you think you got the greatest mousetrap, think about the overall, like, how are you going to make money doing it? And we didn't do the math correctly. And so now I have a plant full of, I don't know, just, lessons of failure. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We did it well, but it was too heavy, so it didn't work. That's great.
Yeah, we died in shipping. So
that's cool. What a great story. So how do you internally? How do you cultivate a culture of innovation? And I think craftsmanship in your manufacturing process. Like, what are some of your insights on how to create an award-winning culture?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned culture is really important. I mean, the leader is one of the few things that the leader only can do is to create that culture. And when I say that you create it, a culture will exist if you don't create it, right? And so we have to be purposeful about what we do to be able to create the cultures we want. And so at least for our company is, I've got a list of expectations that I give to every employee when they show up, and it's mounted on the wall, and just the things that we expect them to do. But one of the things is to run with speed to the customer and to resolve issues quickly, and we give them authority to be able to solve customer problems. And so because of that, my engineers are really creative at coming up with different solutions to customer challenges and customer problems. And also the other thing is part of our mission statement is we are a different kind of supplier. We say yes when the big guys say no. And so because we have that in our culture, we say yes a lot. And so we end up going down some rabbit holes with customers, and we do some kind of creative things. And so it's part of who we are is we are innovators. We are trying to say yes more than no because we are a smaller supplier and we can be a little more flexible. And so we don't have the 14-step stage gate product development model like my competitors do. We have a high five, let's go, let's see if it works, and I think that's been fun, especially after coming out of 22 years in a corporate environment where you had to move so slow. So our speed is important to us. So I think the idea of being, it's part of who we are, is just trying to think differently about solutions. We have one feature on, our products are a little bit boring for this podcast, probably, but we make a thing called a fuse cutout. And a fuse cutout has been around for about 40 years, and the technology hasn't changed too much. We actually sat around and thought, well, what could we do to make a better fuse cutout? And no one's ever really innovated fuse cutouts in the last 40 years. But we added a feature to where if a fuse blew, there would be a visual indicator. So anyone around could see quickly that there was a fuse that was blown. And so the lineman could quickly find the blown fuse and replace it. It didn't seem like a big idea at the time, but it's like the number one product we sell is that people want that visual indicator because it's just like a simple fix. And it's just a creative fix to a product that's 40 years old and no one's ever, addressed it before. So I think that kind of thinking is important in our company.
Yeah. As we started to implement more of this DevOps methodology, we discovered this new metric, which was speed to recovery. And it just seemed like until the DevOps movement hit in software and internet engineering, cloud engineering, that people were just focused on, we'll never go down. Just don't ever go down. Like just, have redundancies. And then they started feeling the cost of redundancy. And, startups were growing, people were becoming more entrepreneurial. The cloud was becoming more stable. It wasn't really wasn't practical to double up everything and test your failover and all of this, right? So in DevOps, we talk a lot about, well, what's your speed to recovery? If you can recover the critical system in 15 minutes with no data loss, does it matter if you were always ready for that, or if you could just tear it down, put it back up, and everything was okay? And I think that's kind of that. Knowing that, it doesn't surprise me that being able to look in a fuse box and know exactly which fuse, yes, it is a fuse, and it is that one, and I just need to replace that, and my speed to recovery is maximized. Because what was the alternative before? They had to get out the tools and go hunt for the broken circuit.
Yeah. So they literally drive down the road with their, most utility trucks have a spotlight looking for the one that's the one that's blown. They drive down the road back and forth because that's how antiquated our grid is. By the way, if there's a power outage, guess how they find out there's a power outage? You call and say that I have a power outage. That's their first indication in most cases. And so then the lineman has to go out and find out where the blown fuse is. And so we set up the system so they could drive down quickly, see which one was open. Well, here's the deal. The utilities actually call it the overtime killer now because it's so they can find the problem so quick that they don't get any overtime. So some utilities, the linemen don't like it because they lose out on their overtime pay.
Oh, that's classic. That's classic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess kind of a wrap-up question here. Just what kind of experience would you share, advice would you give to peers just beginning their digital transformation journey, or just starting their career or their approach to manufacturing? What would you advise the up and comer?
I mean, the biggest thing I would say is make your systems work for you. Don't work for your systems. I know that sounds like weird, but in all my years in corporate, we'd have systems like shoehorned into our organizations, and they, like SAP was a great example of a product forced on us that destroyed our ability to be productive. And SAP is a great program; it's very capable. But when you get a pure vanilla version forced into a company that had a very customized ERP system before, it really shuts down your operation. And in a lot of companies I saw, at least one of my corporate days, is that we did everything to feed the beast. We fed the beast, and then the beast did something. And I say just the opposite. Find systems that are integrated, that they're simple, they're easy to operate, and they feed you. You don't feed them. And I think if you're not operating systems that are easy to use and give you information quickly, and you don't need a PhD to be able to figure them out, then you're doing well. And so don't feed the bear. Don't feed your systems. Let them feed you. And if your systems, you're spending all your time making sure your systems have what they need to operate, then you're not getting the best out of them. Get rid of that. Get something simple and easy. As an entrepreneur, we got rid of all those stupid old systems we had in the old companies, and we put in stuff that all talk to each other. They're easy to use. They give me information in a split second, and I'm not dealing with all the bureaucracy and problems of bigger systems, and they're cheaper. So find things that will work for you, and don't put up with systems that require a lot of effort to get anything out of them. Yeah,
I love that. That's a layup for me because we help a lot of businesses with, I call it the periodic table of business tools, and we help people understand their unique bond, their molecule, if you will, or their particle, how they take, well, I have a little bit of HubSpot, and I have a little bit of QuickBooks, and I have a little bit of these several tools. And we map that out into a kind of a unique visual for them. And it's really interesting, the difference between something where they're using a larger piece of software like a Salesforce or a NetSuite, and how their idea is that would be like all encompassing. That would be almost everything. And then they start thinking about, well, but I have this tool over here to help me send email. And then when you look at the user experience with the customer, and I love what you said about running to the customer, like those tools don't quite customize enough or configure enough to be the exact need for the customer. So it is sometimes better to find smaller specialized tools and then customize that customer layer, like really take, special time and attention with the user's experience. And and we have seen it end up cheaper. So each business has their unique set of those elements of the periodic table of business tools. But when they're combined properly, and I love your guidance, like if that system is making you work for it instead of it working for you, then there's some ticking and tying that needs to be done for sure. That's great.
Yeah,
great
don't
advice.
put up with it. Don't tolerate it. Fix it, especially if you're an entrepreneur. Sometimes in the corporate environment, it's tough. I tell you, I worked 2 years trying to get credit card payments in a corporate environment. And we finally got it. And I did it in 2 weeks as an entrepreneur. So, especially if you're an entrepreneur, don't put up with systems that don't work.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Cool. Well, how can people find you online if they want to continue the conversation? How should they reach out?
Yeah, I've got a website. It's just my name, jonsrennie.com. And in there, you can reach out to me. I'm on social media. I've got a couple of books. I run a podcast called Deep Leadership, of which you're on, and you'll be coming out later this month. So, I highly encourage you to reach out come on my website. You'll find everything about me. I do talk a lot about leadership and leadership stuff. That's my forte. But I'm happy to talk with anybody. So reach out to me and connect.
All right, great. Well, it's been great having you today, and thanks for participating in the Particle Accelerator.
Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.